Welcome back, everyone, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We just talked all about activities and completing the activities section. And now, for those of you who are filling out applications right now, we're talking about supplemental essays. The nice thing, of course, about the activities section is once you complete it for the Common App, it's done for all of your schools that are Common App schools. Supplemental essays, on the other hand, not so much. Joining me for this conversation is my colleague, Lisa Albro, who's also a former admissions officer at Goucher College and a former school counselor. So I know she's had this conversation infinite times. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, it seems like every year for the last 25 years of my life, I think.
Yep. I
So,
mean, sounds about right. I haven't been
yeah,
having that conversation for quite as long, but pretty close, actually.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Well, let's talk about supplemental essays. And I do want to throw out there to our listeners that last year. So if you want to go to our archive, you can look at shows that we did all last fall. And we actually have some specific segments for some specific schools and their questions, some of which may be the same this year. So if you're sort of looking for a little bit more beyond what Lisa and I are going to talk about right now, the archive is a great place to go. And I would just go to 2022 September, October, maybe even August, and possibly even into November if you want to poke around and see what supplemental essays we spoke about last year. But let's talk about them this year. And let's start with something really basic. What the heck are supplemental essays?
What are they? They are specific questions that individual colleges want the answer to. So your personal statement is going to pretty much all your colleges on the Common Application, but then individual schools will have some additional questions that they'll want answered. Not every school, but many schools,
Yep. Yep.
right? And sometimes it's one supplemental essay, sometimes it's multiple supplemental
Yes.
essays.
Hi, Stanford, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I would say that for schools that are asking supplemental essay questions, I certainly found when I was at Penn, we didn't have the Common App when I was at Penn, but Penn still asks similar questions to those that we asked back when I was there. Those were more important in many ways than the main essay. The main essay was important, but those essays were the place where I went to see how much effort at a minimum the student had put into my school's application. And then in the case of some of the questions we asked, I was going to find the link between why was the student applying to this school, right? So can you talk to us about what are some of the general types of supplemental questions that schools are asking?
Sure. I think you touched on it a little bit. The basic one, why this college? Why do you
Yep.
want to come here, right? And this is not the goal to write this essay is not to find lots of little details and list them all, details about the school. Oh, I want to take these classes. I want to take classes with these professors. Boom. That's not it. It's to show the reader the connection that you've made to that institution as regards your goals and your interests, right? So
Right.
how do the things that school offers connect with those things about you? What examples can you show? So yeah, it's not bad to talk about courses you want to take or programs they have or professors there, but not just listing them, showing that direct connection that you've identified, because that's convincing them of your clear and specific reasons for applying to that school.
Right. The why, right? And
The why.
I love when students are that specific because the other harm is, or the other bad form of a why this college essay is one that is so general that you could put any college's name there and it would work without making any
Yes.
other changes. But if all you're doing is telling me classes and professors and programs, and you never connect the dots, as you're saying, between those pieces and what you're hoping to achieve in college, then it's going to fall flat. It just looks like you went on their website and made a list and that's it, right? So
I tell students all the time, your job is to convince your reader of the match that you found with that institution. What
yeah,
are the very specific examples that you can show? Help them understand why you're applying here, not just, randomly.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
some other questions, and I think kind of in keeping with the why this college, why this major, why do you want to study what you say you want to study? And I know this is a point of stress for students who aren't sure what they want to study. I have a lot of kids who are undecided and they say, well, is it bad if I don't know? it's not bad. Undecided, I like to say, in many cases, is not a dirty word, right? It's
Right, right.
okay to be undecided, but some programs, it's really important to show that interest, that kind of commitment, that exposure maybe that you've already had to something in that field, right? So certain place, some kind of computer science, engineering, things like that, maybe some business programs, not all. I don't want
Hmm.
to generalize about those, but sometimes it's important to show that connection. But I just want to get the message out there that it's not a bad thing if you're not decided either. You don't have anything directly to say about the specific majors, but in a response like that, if you're not sure what you want to study, you might talk about some things you're thinking about studying
Yes.
and
So
what that school offers in that vein.
right. I 100% agree with that. It's totally fine to be undecided. What's not fine is to say, I'm totally undecided, and then not give any indication of any academic interests at all, right?
Right.
So come up with 2 or 3 things that you want to explore further. Don't forget, no one is ever going to go back to your application and say, hey, you were undecided and you listed these 3 things as areas of interest. And I see that you are now majoring in something that's completely different. Nobody cares.
Nobody
They're just
cares.
looking to see that you have some academic interest, because at the end of the day, college is about going and studying in the academic side first,
Hmm.
and the rest of the experience second.
Right.
So
I always
love
say
that.
that first and foremost, they're looking for students, right? And
Right.
then for the different interests and talents and skills and abilities that those students come with to share on the whole campus. But first and foremost, college is about education.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Another one that I see is asking about a community that you belong to. Any thoughts on that one?
Mhm. Yeah, that's one that's popping up more these days, I think, than used to. I know University of Michigan always had that as one of their
Yeah.
supplemental questions forever, probably since before I even started in college advising, it seems. But more schools are starting to come up with that, and I think it's really just to get a sense of where do students see themselves. What are they identifying with in terms of an interest or a group or a place where they feel they belong and fit in, and how can they communicate their role there, their place there.
Right.
uh, how do they identify, and now that identity, lately identity is becoming such a big focus, and especially, let's face it, the Supreme Court decision and affirmative action, and colleges aren't asking the same questions that they used to determine what communities, what groups, what backgrounds. This might offer students the opportunity to talk about some of those things that
Right.
the application is no longer directly asking.
Right, right. And just to share some context, right, of your life with an admissions officer, and these are opportunities to do that, right? So we do have these schools like Michigan, such a good example. They've always asked that community question, but we're seeing more schools ask something like that, right, in similar ways, just trying to get at a little bit more about who are you and how does that tie into the student that you are and the life experience that you've had and what you might bring to our campus,
Right.
right?
Because let's face it, we know that, coming from the admissions background, we know you're trying to build a class. You don't just want to randomly admit everybody whose numbers look good, right? You're looking for the personalities. You're looking for different interests and talents and skills and backgrounds, and you want to have a nice variety of different types of people and experiences to come together on your campus who can share those experiences with one another and enrich each other's lives.
Right,
Really.
exactly. So if everybody has the exact same experience, then it's a pretty boring place. And I think, certainly there are some schools where the experience is going to be a little bit more homogenous, and there are students who really seek that out. One sign that might be of little consideration to the admissions offices, they're not asking questions like that. Not to say that admissions offices that don't ask that question aren't looking for a lot of different experiences to bring to the campus. But certainly if they are asking that question and you're a student who's looking for something that isn't going to be the same old all the time, and every student's going to be exactly like you, this is a sign that they're shooting for a little bit more variety. That's an intentional choice that school is making. And that's going to be important to some students and perhaps less important to other students.
Exactly.
I think we touched on this already a little bit, but I'd like to go back to it because it does feel like it comes up frequently, which is, why do colleges want students? The whole point of the Common App was meant to be, in theory, that you fill out one application and you send it to schools that accept it, and you don't have to do more than just filling out the one. And of course, supplemental essays mean that you are doing much more than just one. So why is this important to the colleges?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. The Common App, it was meant to be kind of a one-stop shop and easier to get all that information. But let's say, listen, the main part of the Common App saves you from having to repeat all of that same thing over and over and over
Right.
again. So it's still accomplishing that. But individual colleges have individual interests. There might be hot button issues that they want to get your opinion on, or maybe there's something about their campus culture or community that they've designed questions to ask you to get to the heart of how you view that, or how you might react to that, or interact with different people on the campus about that. Uh, so it may not be readily apparent to you why they're asking certain questions, but they know why they're asking those
Yes.
questions, right? And again, I think it all goes back to fit. It goes back to understanding where that student kind of meshes in to that campus community, and what kind of maybe an intellectual capacity they may have.
Right.
Especially some of the more selective colleges, the kinds of questions they're asking, they're not just looking for very basic responses. They're looking to understand how a student reasons through this question and thinks about certain things.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And, they're also looking, again, I think I said it earlier, they're looking to see, do you really want to go here, or are you just throwing an application their way?
Right.
And when the student is just kind of throwing the application their way, it usually shows up in that supplemental essay. They've spent perhaps hours perfecting their main Common App essay, and then
Yes.
minutes on the supplemental essay. And
Right.
it shows. So.
Right, exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of students make, is they just kind of, oh, well, that's an easy question. I'll just, and zoom through it and maybe not revise it, just kind of put it on the application as is. We've seen the end result of that too many times. And it just kind of makes you say, okay, well, I was kind of seriously looking at this student until I saw that they kind of blew off my supplemental question. And now, see ya.
Yes. I have many, many memories of reading through a file and being pretty excited about a student, and then getting to the Y pen and feeling like, oh, okay, well, never mind then.
Yes.
Because clearly this wasn't really an interest, or they would have spent more time on this piece.
Correct.
While we have a little bit of time left, not much, I want to talk about where to find these, because it feels like it should be pretty straightforward, but they're not all in the same place. So how do you make sure you've found all of the supplemental essays that, or that that each school is asking?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So on the Common Application, yeah, it makes sense to say it's probably going to be, more often than not, it will be in the writing section on the supplement, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes, in a sneaky way, it's someplace else in the supplement. It could be in under the questions, right? Sometimes the supplemental essay doesn't even appear on the application. You submit your application, and then you get a notification through your student portal or through email saying, hey, we want you to answer these questions. Here's
Right.
another essay. Please complete this.
My least favorite, right? You
My
think
least
you're
favorite too.
done.
You think you're done, but you're not done.
That is not very common. So for people kind of like, oh my goodness, is this
Right.
something I'm going to encounter at a lot of schools? No, you're
No.
not.
Yeah.
But when they do it, it's not great. And then the only other thing I would mention is that sometimes you need to actually select the school. If the university has a number of different schools,
Yes.
sometimes you need to select the school, right? Or sometimes you have to select the major before the
Yes.
actual question will pop up.
Right.
Again, I don't think that's a really great thing, but maybe what they found was that if students didn't have to do that, then they were writing 7 different supplemental essays when they only needed to write 1. I don't know. I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but they do it.
Not sure either.
Yeah.
It's
Lisa,
one
thank
more
you so
thing
much
to have to deal with. You are more
Yes,
than
thank you
welcome.
so much for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks to Lisa and all my guests. Next week, Ian is hosting, and we're covering, do senior grades matter? Hint, yes, they do. The financial implications of applying ED and how to relax through this process. It is possible to be a little less stressed as you go through. And that's kind of, we want to offer you some thoughts on how to make that happen for you. If you have questions, you can submit them to us on Facebook or Instagram. You could also send them via email, gettingin.voiceamerica@gmail.com. And don't forget, we are here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific.